Why, hello there, Nice Tale here. I hope this video finds you well. And today I'm going to be bringing you a review of a knife. The review is going to be full length, specs and the whole thing. Summary for this knife will be coming down the road and will be much shorter if this is not your jam, which is perfectly fine. What are we going to be looking at today? We're going to be looking at the Kunwu Jericho. This is one of numerous very nice knives from Kunwu, honestly. They do some good stuff with some, oftentimes either interesting steals or extremely interesting price points, and this one kind of hits a middle ground of that. But without further ado, let's just jump into specs. Well, I guess with further ado, I would like to say, consider liking and subscribing. It would greatly help the channel. It would greatly help me. Any thoughts, any ways I can improve, feel free to leave them down there. If you just hate the video and just let me know why or something like that. I don't care. It's all good. I will absolutely take into consideration all opinions and see what I can do to make better content for everybody. I mean, I'm still very small. This is a phone, and honestly, well, as you, yeah, so whatever. But a subscription and a like or comment would be very appreciated. Now, without further ado, let's get into specs. You have just shy of 3.5 inches of blade by the looks of it. Yeah, just barely shy of that. With, maybe a hair over. No, it's pretty darn close to almost 8 inches exact on the dot. And there's your hair over 4.5 inches. Almost 4 5/8. So, reasonable ratios, just about 3.5, just about a little over 4.5 on the handle. Pretty decent ratios, not terrible. Our resident comparison knives coming out for the comparison, obviously. The CV Conspirator for the full size, and the CV Elementum for the small knife. As you can probably see, this is very close to the Conspirator. It is, you might be able to see, just a tiny bit smaller than the Conspirator. I mean, just a hair. It's still a full-size knife, but you do notice that it's a little bit under the 3.5 inches of blade, where the handle is very, very, very comparable. Maybe a little bit. Yeah, I think you get a tiniest hair more handle and a tiniest hair more blade on the Conspirator, but it's still a full-size knife. And our resident handle size comparison, because not everybody has those knives and knows what I'm talking about. This gives you a very clean look at what you're gripping into, and you're gripping into almost just shy of 2 AA batteries plus a forward finger choil. You probably will be able to get your hands on this thing, but you may not always, if you have really big hands, you may not be always perfectly comfortable on this, and I'll talk about that why probably much later in the video, but if you're interested, stick around. And just find that nebulous moment, because I'm not going to mark it out. 4.36 ounces. Not an ounce an inch or anything, but for decently thick titanium scales, that's pretty reasonable. In fact, it's pretty light for what it is. It's got a decent amount of milling in there. I'll showcase that in just a little bit as well. Let's move on to hardware check, which is T8, T8, T8. Kunwu does predominantly T8s. There is a T6 on the lock bar insert, but ideally you'll never interface with that. Handle thickness. It is contoured. Pretty heavily contoured, in fact. 558, probably around 560 thousandths, which is over half an inch. 500 thousandths is a half an inch, so it's decently thick. 124, 125 thousandths on the blade stock. Pretty reasonable. Not the thinnest ever, but certainly not thick. Very, very good, very medium. Sort of on the thinner side, even, perhaps. Behind the edge, which is right about there, 11 thousandths. So let's call it that you'll likely find it to be somewhere in the 10 to 12 thousandths behind the edge, which is nice and thin, and it is nice and slicey. This thing does perform very well. In fact, I don't have... Do I? No. Well, if I had something that was cardboard other than this buck thing, yeah, it goes through it pretty well. In fact, it went straight through the plastic without me even realizing it. So yeah, it cuts quite well. Very nice, very sharp, very good edge on this thing. Actually, it's pretty darn bitey too. It really is. And, of course, the benefit of the DLC is that it's not going to mar the blade in pretty much any way anytime soon. I believe we are done with the specs at a relatively brisk 5 minutes-ish, 5:10. But, and I think that was the last. The specs, who knows? I've completely lost my train of thought. You see, I started moving into talking about the cutting and everything like that before the specs were done, and now I'm completely thrown off. Now we're there. Okay, so what are we looking at? We're looking at Vanax blade steel, which is one of the top premium, most corrosion-proof steels you're probably going to find. It is also usually quite a bit more expensive on less used knives, or it's less used and it's expensive, so it's nice to see that. They are 60 to 61, I think, heat treating, which I believe is where Vanax is supposed to be, or ish. Could it do better with a little bit higher custom sort of heat treat? I don't know, but I mean, usually small batch custom heat treats are better than production in general, and you're almost always going to find that if the person knows what they're doing. But Kunwu is a stickler for getting their heat treats and their blade steels right, or well done and well executed. So I'm assuming that this is probably going to perform about as well as any Vanaxes you're going to get. I know it's got good geometry, and that's, what, 8/10 of the battle, let's call it. good percentage. Super high corrosion resistance. Corrosion resistance should be reasonably tough. Not the most toughest. Okay, talking. And it should have pretty darn good edge retention, particularly among the super corrosion resistant steels. This should probably be one of the higher ones, to my knowledge. Maybe I'm completely wrong about Vanax, but it should be pretty darn good as a steel. This particular one, it is spitting, apparently. This particular one is in a satin DLC. Kunwu does a beautiful satin DLC. Yes, it is black, but it, in a lot of lights, doesn't look it. Very attractive. I like how they do their satin DLCs. It is, of course, very, very, like all DLC, still quite smudgy. Still very, very smudgy. You're gonna see marks and smudges and stuff on this blade 100%. Why is that? What is that? What is that? I don't know what that is. Whatever. DLC is just like that. I mean, I just wipe that off and you see the splotch. it's just what DLC does. It can be a pain in the butt, but sometimes it looks really good and sometimes it's worth it. In this case, I think it's worth it, especially with this nice satin that they do. We're looking at a drop, well, actually, kind of a clip point harpoon blade. The harpoon does offer something. I mean, it's a little bit soft as into the transition up into the harpoon, so it doesn't really offer like a stopping point on there, but it definitely offers some value, I suppose. It looks cool. There we go. There's your value. Clip point harpoon blade, decent amount of belly, forward positioning on the belly, not super forward, but reasonably forward, but however, you can still definitely get to the tip pretty easily. I'd say you start losing access to the tip about down there, honestly, which is pretty decent. So you got good tip access for a good good draw cut. Yeah, there we go. There's the word. The sharpening tool and plunge grind is absolutely fantastic. There's a metric ton of life on this thing, and it's reasonably thin, so you're going to get a nice long life out of this. Plus, the stop pin is way back here, so you're not going to have to worry about that. The only opening method is the hole aperture here that you can reverse and thumb flick off of. It works quite well. They left a little bit of kind of partial fuller in there, and you can both reverse flick and thumb flick off that or the hole itself. Works great, no problem whatsoever. There is some jimping on here. It is definitely functional. It is not like the best kind of jimping, but it is definitely functional, so who cares if it's the best kind of jimping? The best kind of jimping works, and so I guess in a way this is the best kind of jimping. You will notice that there is one little speck right here where that is not coated with DLC on my particular one, and you probably don't have to worry about that. But that can definitely happen. That's just a nice little showcase that something, maybe just a speck of dust or something, floated in and landed on the blade when it was being coated in the DLC, and it didn't get that point. It happens. This is not a big deal. It honestly didn't bother me that much. Enough that I brought it up, but yeah. I wasn't like, oh my god, the blade's ruined. No, it's fine. And of course, it's not even gonna, like, that exposure isn't really gonna corrode because it's Vanax, right? So no big deal. This knife is on bearings. The action on this knife is fine. It's not great. I have a Padre from Kunwu that is much better. This one has a very heavy a very heavy lock bar pressure. And it's got a very slow initial disengagement, which is actually good because also I've noticed with a number of Kunwu's knives, because they put this big forward choil on there, the actual termination of the edge sticks out far and has been prone, especially on this knife and the Padre, to try and clip your cuticle as it's disengaging. It's very easy to catch some of the sharp edge of that. This one has a very slow and sort of deliberate initial drop, which honestly helps against that. Plus, also, as if you go up to the very top of the lock bar, you can sort of catch this thing with the edge of your fingernail, right there, before it gets your thumb, which is important. If you have thicker thumbs or different shape, maybe that doesn't work. But me, it does protect myself a little bit there from if I go down here. This is definitely coming into my cuticle, and it kind of is unpleasant because it is pretty sharp. But this particular one has a very slow disengagement, which is kind of helps to protect against that even further. Beyond that, like that, right there, I just got myself. If you're not aware of what you're doing, you can definitely catch yourself. I hope that doesn't bleed, but you can see it's... you're probably not going to be able to see that little mark on my name. Beyond that point, however, or you could just do that. That works too. It is a nice shake shut. However, I will note that on this particular variant, I definitely feel the bearings moving. This is not the smoothest Kunwu I've ever felt. I have a Pulsar, though. I mean, that's a crossbar lock, but still, the bearings itself in there are very smooth, and the compadres, or Padre, not the compadre, is extremely smooth. This one, I definitely feel the bearings moving a little bit, and it's not the just tight lock bar pressure. It's definitely in the bearings. It's still a very nice, comfortable shake shot, but if you're really looking for it, you can definitely feel a little bit of something in there. And I have cleaned this out, so it shouldn't be too much grit in there. Does that matter? No. Is it still very nice and premium feeling? Yes. It's just maybe could be better bearings. They seem to be Teflon cage bearings, I think. So that might even improve over time. I don't know. But overall, it works. And it works well. Where was I? Handle. Handle is where we were. Okay. Titanium handle. This particular one has this honeydew texture. It looks sort of like a membranous tissue kind of texture, almost. Which is true. I mean, the appropriate on a honeydew, they call it, is sort of like an outside skin membrane rind thing. So, yeah, that's what it looks like. That's fine. It might be for you. It might not be. They do offer different variants. I think there was a plain flat titanium. There might be I know there's an orange peel, but was there a plain flat? I don't know. A lot of times they often offer diamond texture and raindrop texture, which was also a variant for this one. Whether you can find all of those variants still in stock, I don't know. Whether they're going to come back, I don't know. Kunwu sometimes brings their popular knives back, but doesn't always bring every single model back. So what's left of this out there is what's left of this out there. But this particular texture, it's either for you or it's not. I don't want this on every one of my knives, but having it on one knife, yeah, it's cool. It's fun. It's interesting. It's different, right? No big deal there. It is very nicely contoured. In fact, let's see. There's your contouring right there. And this particular one is just in a B-Blast. They also offer a DLC, full DLC, or I don't know if they offered a regular satin blade with DLC handle, but if they do, that wouldn't be unreasonable either. Hello, dog. This knife does technically violate my rule of design elements on the front, but not on the back, because there is no even small inlay here for the Timascus. However, there is Timascus in the pivot collars, and maybe Kunwu offers or will offer at a later date a Timascus pocket clip, and I could bring that over. This one's not the biggest offender because it is carried through the design enough for my tastes, but I'm a bit of a stickler when it comes to that. If it's on the front side, and I like it to carry through like the design on the back side. It's one of the reasons you don't see a lot of hinders on my channel. They have G10 and titanium. It's very, and usually textured G10. It's very different from side to side, and to make them consistent throughout, you're just going to end up with flat titanium that's much more expensive because you're putting a titanium scale on a hinder, and that's not cheap usually. Or ever. But, though, I do have the hinder automatic because that's full titanium. That carries the design elements through, and I like that. It's probably this nitpickiness about these kind of things has probably saved me some money from designs that I have just completely passed over, seeing textures and elements that were on one side and just flat nothing on the other. It's definitely saved me some money over the years. Definitely. I already mentioned the pivot collars. The hardware is flat matte DLC for the pocket clip, hardware, and backspacer, but the pivot is polished, or not polished, well, almost more polished. It's a satin, but it's almost a little bit more polished than even the blade, which is nice. It's a little standoff pop out, right? There is considerable milling in there, and I don't know what this is, but it looks like the inlay is held in by a screw that's right here, for some reason not one right here on this pillar of titanium, and then also hit with some epoxy. So it's held in by 2 points, should be held in pretty well, and it's nicely contoured and comfortable with the rest of the handle. But you'd still feel it. It's like it's made to be contoured and flow along, but distinct enough that you know it's there. It's kind of nice. And I have to say, this Timascus is pretty good for Kunwu. I have historically seen some of the Kunwu Timascus that hasn't been overly impressive. This is pretty nice. I like it. Do I still think that some other companies doing like the really, really nice Timascus high grade stuff, or maybe better grade? I don't know, but has been better? Yes, I do think that. But this is pretty darn good in my opinion, as far as Timascus goes. Pocket clip. Pocket clip is tall. Pretty simple. It's a little bit pokey right here, a little bit sharper than it needs to be. It does have a continuous rise. It does flex well. It does have good retention. It is over this texture, and it has a very, very sort of small point of contact. So on that very point of contact, it can be bunchy. It can definitely grate your pants a little bit. It's not too hard in and out of the pants, mostly because the contact point is so small. Even if there's a lot of pressure to it, it's just there's not much to overcome. But it does hold in pretty well. It is not deep carry, but it is medium depth. The texture does offer pretty easy a little bit of assistance to a pretty easy pull in and out of the pocket. It works, but it can be a little bit tight. Like if I were to take, say, this thinner, crappier cloth and put it under there, you definitely start seeing it tear at the cloth a little bit, or bunch up at that point. It's not bad, it's not great, but it works. And actually for thicker pants that are still going to make it under there, it might actually work a little bit better, though it will definitely affect them a little. Yeah, well, backspacer. The last thing I guess we would need to talk about is the ergos and the lock bar cutout. Lock bar cutout, there isn't much one. It doesn't really sit proud. There is definitely chamfering on both sides, but not a ton, and it's a little tight. It is a little tight to get in there, and it definitely makes you have to come almost from the front. Kind of diagonal, almost from the front to get in there. If that's not your thing, if you want super lock bar access to be super comfortable, this is going to be a little bit tighter than you probably want. Just to take note of that, it is not like, well, sitting right here, metric shit ton of lock bar access. It's not that. But it works. Just takes a little getting used to. And coming at it from this side, when you come at a knife from the front, what I notice is when the knife drops too far, that's when it starts potentially causing issues if you're not at the very top of the lock bar, if that even works. Sometimes if going into the very top of the lock bar can hit the tang or something to stop it from even dropping. But if you go down low, that's when you start running into issues, especially coming from directly dead center forward instead of from the side. This one, as I said earlier, does catch your nail if you do it right up at the top there, so there are a little bit some methods to counter that, which is just something to get used to. Just thought it was worth mentioning. The ergos are pretty darn good, pretty darn neutral. You definitely feel the clip. It is a little bit tall of a clip, and like I said, you don't really feel the pokiness, but it is there. But it's comfortable. It's very comfortable in the hand. I will say that it's comfortable for like a push grip. Though, when I go up here in the push grip, I actually do start hitting this in my hand, the pokiness of the front of that clip. That's when I start noticing it, like right there, gripping down, squeezing. It's actually not the most comfortable thing in existence. Could I adjust slightly to get it like this and be more comfortable? Sure. But just like initial grip, you're just going to have to maybe adjust a little bit for the push grip if you're going to choke up in it. Or don't squeeze down too tight. Back here, push grip's fine. Saber grip, comfortable in both positions. I will say that right here, this little scallop here is a little tight when you're holding it back. Like my index finger feels just, I mean, it's a stubby little thing, but it's thick kind of chunky finger. I hate my fingers, but wow, everything I'm doing is like marring up this blade. What the heck is this now on the blade? That wasn't there just a second ago. And it's gone. Okay, so I'm just making the blade worse by the second. Let's just take our attention away from the blade for a second. This scallop feels a little bit small. If you have big fingers, if you have thicker fingers, even though mine aren't the longest, they are chunky. And, well, as you can see, it doesn't really fit in there particularly amazingly well at this first knuckle kind of junction. I will say that it is definitely better here because the middle finger or ring is more okay with the sort of a trigger pull and wrapping around a little bit. It's certainly more comfortable up here, but you might be surprised to find that it is a little bit tight feeling up there. It doesn't really bother me or affect me or stop me from, but it is noticeable. Also, though, the lock bar cutout is... It is nicely chamfered, but because of the texture, there are areas where it's a little bit feeling sharp. You don't really come into contact with that basically at all, so no big deal. They've managed to keep that away from you because it could be sharp. But they've addressed that, or it's worked out. Either way, I'd say choking up on this one is probably the best bet for pure comfort. And the final thing to talk about is the price point. And the price point on this, as with most Kunwus, is quite good for what it is. A titanium frame lock with Timascus, a decent amount of it, and Vanex blade steel, normally not going to come in anywhere under $350. I mean, that might be being generous. It's probably going to come in closer to $400 at the base. These things start at $310, I want to say. And they go up to $340, $339. This particular variant, I believe, was $329. So there's some different options and variants in there. And yeah, it's undeniable that it's giving you good value for your price. It's expensive. It's a premium knife, 100%. There is absolutely no doubt about that, and there's no way to argue or disagree with that. But if you're going to go there, Kunwu does usually offer some really good stuff at their price points, especially with the fact that they do some of the best satin DLC, even if it is printy. So yeah, Kunwu's always doing something interesting. Definitely check out their website. I'll link that down below. And though every variant may not be available for this knife, you can also check out White Mountain knives. They often get Kunwu's in. Maybe the variant that you're looking for or a different variant will be available on that site. Check them both before maybe you go with any, but you're getting a pretty decent value. You're getting a pretty darn nice knife, and even though the bearings could be just a tiny bit smoother, when you're actually just engaging the knife and doing this, you don't notice it. It feels good. And everything feels good. I will say it does feel a little bit like tight and smaller than I thought it was going to be, but not in a bad way, just a surprising way. Performance-wise, though, it's done well. It cuts, it cleans up. The DLC should keep the blade from really scratching or marring for quite a long time. And yeah, it's a good knife. It's definitely a fun knife, and it's definitely bringing a pretty, I mean, it's not the most out there blade shape or structure of a knife in existence, but it's definitely doing things to add just, interesting elements to it, which is always something that I like to see. Functional knife that also looks cool. Look no further than Kunwu, I suppose, but you can look all over the place and you'll definitely find something. There's like 4 or 5 other knives from Kunwu that I want to check out, but just, can't afford them all the time. So hopefully I'll continue growing and maybe I'll be able to get them to send something in for me to check out one of these one day sometime soon. I probably have to hit about 1,000 subs for that, so if you can help with that, I would greatly appreciate it. I'm just going to end that on this note and say thank you very much for watching. Again, check out the summary when it comes out, and Dog is apparently upset with me, so I'm going to end things here and say see you later.